My name is Samantha Lee. I'm 32 years old, living in Brooklyn, New York. If I had to sum myself up in one word, it would be determined. I didn't have a glamorous start, but I worked hard, scraped by, and built something no one ever thought I could. When my so-called friends came over and mocked my cheap little apartment, they thought they were laughing at my failure. But the realtor's smile froze them in place when she revealed the truth. I owned the entire building they were sneering at. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Has anyone ever mocked your home, your job, your life, only to find out they didn't know the full story? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear it. It was a Friday evening when the incident occurred. My friends, if you could call them that, had decided we'd rotate hosting dinner nights. Each of us would take turns inviting everyone over, showing off our spaces, sharing food, and catching up. When it was finally my turn, I hesitated. My apartment wasn't flashy. It wasn't decorated with designer furniture or sparkling chandeliers, like Megan's loft in Manhattan. It wasn't a sprawling brownstone like Jessica's family-owned townhouse. It was simple, clean, comfortable, but to them, simple was the same as cheap. They arrived in heels, clicking on the worn wooden floors, their coats brushing against the narrow hallway as they stepped inside. I had lit candles, cooked dinner, and set the table with care, every detail chosen to make them feel welcome. But the moment Megan looked around, she smirked. "Wow, Sam. Cozy. Real. Modest." Jessica giggled, running her fingers along the chipped counter. "Reminds me of my college dorm. So retro." Their laughter stung, but I forced a smile. "It's home," I said softly. As the night went on, their comments grew sharper. "Do you hear the radiator? Sounds like it's about to explode," Megan joked, sipping her wine. "Your windows let in so much street noise. Don't you get tired of that?" Jessica added. "Sam, honestly, how do you live like this?" Each jab landed like a punch. I tried to laugh it off, to remind myself that I didn't owe them explanations. But inside, I was burning. Because what they didn't know was that this wasn't just my apartment. It was my building. I clenched my fists under the table, biting my tongue. I wanted to shout it in their faces, to tell them that every chipped counter, every creaky stairwell, every brick they mocked, belonged to me. Was that the rent they bragged about paying to some faceless landlord? My tenants paid it to me. But I stayed quiet, because timing matters, and I knew that one day the truth would come out in a way they couldn't laugh off. That night, after they left, I sat by my window overlooking the street. Their laughter still echoed in my ears, their cruel words replaying. But behind the sting was something else: resolve. Because if they thought my cheap apartment made me small, they had no idea how high I had already climbed. And to understand why their mockery cut so deep and why my revenge was so sweet, you have to know how I got here. Because the truth is, this building wasn't handed to me. I fought for it, and their laughter only reminded me of every battle I had already survived. I didn't come from money. Far from it. I grew up in a 2-bedroom walk-up in Queens, the kind of place where the heat clanged in winter and the summers were sticky with humidity. My mom worked double shifts as a nurse. My dad, when he was still around, drove cabs until exhaustion swallowed him. We weren't poor, but we were always on the edge of just enough. Mom used to say, "Samantha, stability is worth more than diamonds." She meant a steady paycheck, a roof overhead, and bills paid on time. To her, that was luxury. I believed her. My younger brother, Daniel, didn't. He chased quick money, fast cars, and bad investments. He mocked me for clipping coupons, for taking the subway, for patching up shoes instead of buying new ones. "Sam?" he'd laugh. "You'll die in some shoebox apartment saving pennies while the rest of us actually live." That voice echoed. Later, when others laughed at my place, Even in our chaos, there were family traditions. Every Sunday, Mom would cook pasta, no matter how tired she was. We'd sit around the table, argue about politics, tease each other about school or work. But as the years passed, those dinners thinned out. Daniel stopped coming unless he needed money. And when Dad left for good, Mom's eyes carried an exhaustion I never forgot. It was in those moments I promised myself I'd build something solid, something no one could take away. That promise shaped me. While my peers chased flashy apartments, in the city, I chose practical spaces. I saved every dime. I worked 2 jobs, assistant by day, waitress by night, then used my scraps of free time to take online courses in real estate and finance. People laughed when I said no to trips, no to bars, no to nights out. Sam's always busy. Sam's cheap, but I wasn't cheap. I was focused, because I knew what they didn't. Every dollar I saved was a brick in my foundation. One night, after another exhausting double shift, I walked past a crumbling building in Brooklyn. For most, it was an eyesore. Graffiti, broken, windows, a sagging stoop. But to me, it looked like an opportunity. The rent was cheap. The tenants were hard-working families like mine. And the owner? Desperate to sell. I ran the numbers 100 times, my hands shaking over a calculator in my tiny bedroom. Could I do it? I didn't know. But I knew I had to try. I drained every account I had, cashed in savings bonds, took loans, sold the car I'd worked years to buy. Family thought I was insane. Daniel sneered. You? A landlord? Please. You'll be broke in 6 months. Even Mom frowned. Samantha, stability doesn't mean taking risks. But I smiled softly. Sometimes stability is built, Mom, brick by brick, owning the building. Wasn't glamorous. The first winter, I spent nights fixing busted pipes and days juggling tenants' calls between office shifts. I wore the same coat for 3 years, skipped dinners out, lived in the smallest unit, the one my friends would later mock. But every sacrifice had a purpose. Still, I noticed the whispers. Relatives, neighbors, even so-called friends, they didn't see an investment. They saw a woman living cheap, and in their eyes, cheap meant small. What they didn't realize was that while they laughed at my chipped counters and creaky floors, every month the rent checks were written in my name, and one day, those checks would silence every smirk. Owning a building wasn't glamorous. People imagine landlords sitting back while rent checks roll in. Reality? I was up at dawn unclogging drains, patching leaks, and negotiating with plumbers who overcharged. And because I lived in the smallest unit, no one suspected the truth. To them, I was just another tenant, scraping by. It started with Megan. We were out for dinner one night, sitting at a chic restaurant she loved to brag about. As I scanned the menu, calculating what I could afford, she leaned in with a smirk. So, Sam, still living in that shoebox? Don't you ever get tired of, I don't know, mediocrity? Jessica snickered. She probably spends all her money on rent. My cheeks burned. I stirred my water glass and forced a laugh. It works for me, but inside, something twisted. Because if they only knew, they'd choke on their cocktails. It wasn't just friends. One Sunday dinner, Daniel chimed in between bites of pasta. Sam, you should come see my new place. Big windows, stainless steel appliances. Not like your little dungeon. Mom shot him a look. Daniel. But, he shrugged, grinning. What? I'm just saying. Sam works so hard, but she's still living like a college student. Doesn't add up. His words landed heavily. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to tell him that half of his rent went straight into my account. Later that night, I overheard Megan whispering to Jessica as they left my apartment after a movie night. Can you believe she lives like this? At her age? 32 and still in a dump. Jessica giggled. Maybe she just doesn't know how to manage money. That's why she never has nice things. Their laughter echoed down the hallway long after the door shut. I sat on my couch that night staring at the cracked ceiling, fists clenched. How easy it would be to throw the truth in their faces. To say, "This isn't my landlord's building. It's mine." But I didn't. Because timing mattered, and their mockery was becoming fuel. One afternoon, I came home early and caught Jessica snooping around my kitchen drawers during a girls' night. I froze in the doorway. "Looking for something?" She jumped, cheeks flushed. "Oh, just, a spoon." But her eyes flicked to the rent ledgers I'd accidentally left half-tucked under a folder. My heart skipped. Did she see? Did she know? I smiled tightly, sliding the folder shut. "Spoons are in the other drawer." She laughed nervously, brushing past me. But the glint in her eyes wasn't embarrassment. It was curiosity. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. It wasn't just mockery anymore. They weren't content laughing at me. They were starting to dig for secrets. It happened on a Saturday night at Megan's loft in Manhattan. She'd invited a group of us, friends, acquaintances, people I barely knew, for wine, music, and networking. I almost didn't go, but part of me hoped maybe this time would be different. I should have trusted my instincts. Her place was everything mine wasn't. High ceilings, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city lights like a painting. Guests mingled with glasses of champagne, designer coats draped casually on the backs of chairs. I stepped in wearing my simple black dress, holding a modest bottle of wine I'd picked up on the way. Immediately, I felt out of place. And they made sure I knew it. Jessica spotted me first. "Sam, you made it." Her eyes flicked to my bottle and she smirked. "Cute. Where'd you get this? Discount rack?" Laughter rippled around the group. I forced a smile, setting it down on the counter. "It's a good vintage," I said, softly, though my voice lacked conviction. But Megan wasn't done. She raised her glass, her eyes glinting. "You know, Sam's place could really use some wine like this. If only it had a wine rack, or a kitchen that wasn't falling apart." The crowd chuckled. I tried to brush it off, retreat to a quiet corner. But Jessica followed, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "So tell us, Sam, how's life in your little shoebox? Do the Roaches pay rent, or are they just roommates?" The group erupted in laughter. My cheeks burned. My throat tightened. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. But what made it worse was when I glanced across the room and saw Daniel, my own brother, laughing along with them. That was the moment it broke me. Not Megan, not Jessica, not even the strangers, but Daniel, the same brother who used to share Sunday pasta dinners, who teased me but still had my back. Or so I thought. Hearing him laugh at their cruelty cut deeper than anything else. Megan wasn't finished. She clinked her glass for attention, smirking. "Everyone, let's raise a toast to Samantha, for proving you don't need money to live in New York, just low standards." The laughter roared, bouncing off the brick walls, filling every corner of the loft. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream the truth, to shout, "That shoebox you mock? It's mine." Every brick, every stair, every window, but the words stuck in my throat. I just stood there, trembling, trapped in humiliation. I left early, mumbling excuses about work. No one stopped me. They were too busy laughing, drinking, and celebrating themselves. On the subway ride home, I stared at my reflection in the window. My face pale, my eyes wet. Her words replayed in my head like poison. Low standards. But somewhere beneath the shame, a new thought flickered. If they wanted to laugh at me for living cheap, then one day I'd make sure they learned exactly who their landlord really was. The subway screeched into Brooklyn that night, but I barely noticed. My reflection in the window stared back at me. Pale skin, glassy eyes, lips pressed tight to hold back tears. I had been humiliated before, but never like this. Never so publicly. Never with Daniel laughing alongside the others. When I walked into my apartment, the familiar scent of old wood and faint detergent wrapped around me. Normally, it comforted me. But tonight, it felt like proof of everything they said. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. Their laughter replayed in my head, sharper each time. Shoebox, low standards. Roaches as roommates. The words clawed at me, echoing in the silence. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, my heart racing. Was I fooling myself? Was I ridiculous for living here, even if I owned it? Was I pathetic compared to Megan's loft, Jessica's townhouse, and Daniel's endless show-off stories? Maybe they were right. Maybe I was small. The next morning, I found myself in the bathroom, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection. My eyes were red, my hair a mess, my face drawn. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I whispered, voice trembling, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'll never be more than this." Hearing myself say it out loud cut deeper than their words ever had. But then, a memory surfaced. My mother, sitting at the kitchen table years ago, was exhausted after a double shift. She'd grabbed my hands and said, "Samantha, stability is worth more than diamonds. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I clung to that memory like a lifeline, because the truth was, I wasn't small. I wasn't failing. I was building. Quietly, patiently, brick by brick. I wiped my tears, my reflection blurring into focus. For the first time in hours, my voice steadied. They think I'm cheap. They think I'm nothing. Let them laugh, because one day, I'll make sure the truth shuts them up for good. I grabbed my journal from the nightstand, flipping to a blank page. In big, bold letters I wrote, "They mocked my apartment. I'll make them choke when they realize I own it all." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not peacefully, but with resolve simmering under my skin. I wasn't going to defend myself with words anymore. I wasn't going to beg them to see me differently. I was going to show them. And when the moment came, I'd make sure they could never laugh again. Because they thought I was powerless. But they had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. And when it hit, it would leave them speechless. After that night in Megan's loft, I stopped waiting for people to see my worth. They wouldn't believe words. They wouldn't believe the hints. They'd only believe proof. So I started planning. First, I made sure everything about the building was airtight. Paperwork, contracts, tax filings, every detail updated and organized. I didn't want anyone to dismiss me as lucky or pretending. I scanned receipts, stored copies with my attorney, and made sure the deed was ready to be presented at a moment's notice. If they tried to call me a liar, I'd crush the denial with black and white evidence. Then I called Sarah. Sarah was the realtor who had helped me navigate the brutal Brooklyn market when I first bought the building. She had become more than a business contact. She was a mentor, even a friend. When I told her what had happened at Megan's loft, her lips pressed into a tight line. "They laughed at you in front of strangers?" she asked. I nodded. My throat tightened as I added, "Even my brother." Her eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "Then it's time they see who you really are, and when they do, make sure it's public." That was Sarah. No pity. Just strategy. A week later, I arranged another gathering at my apartment. This time, I invited everyone: Megan, Jessica, Daniel, and even a few others who had witnessed the humiliation. But I didn't tell them why. I just said I wanted to host again. They laughed when I suggested it. Megan even texted back, "Round 2 in the shoebox? Brave." I let her laugh, because this time I had Sarah on standby. In the days leading up to it, I let little comments slip, hints that I was working on something big, that changes were coming. It wasn't bragging, it was bait. I wanted their curiosity sharpened, their skepticism ready, so that when the truth hit, it would sting even more. The night of the dinner, I set the table with care again. Same candles, same chipped counters, same old radiator humming. I wanted everything to look exactly as it had the first time they mocked me, so when they sneered, the contrast would be that much sweeter. The doorbell rang, heels clacked on the floor, and coats rustled in the hallway. Megan stepped in, smirking. "Well, at least you cleaned up. Still feels cramped." Jessica snorted, eyeing the counter. "Retro, as always." Daniel smirked at me, shaking his head like he pitied me. I smiled, calm, steady. "Make yourselves comfortable. Dinner will be ready soon." Halfway through the night, Sarah arrived, carrying a folder and her usual sharp smile. I introduced her casually. "This is Sarah, my realtor." The word realtor perked them up immediately. Megan raised an eyebrow. "Thinking of finally upgrading, Sam?" Jessica giggled. "Guess she's tired of living in a shoebox." I just smiled. Something like that. Sarah set the folder on the table, her eyes meeting mine, and I knew the moment was coming. The big trap was set. And soon, their laughter would turn to silence. The night of the second dinner, I felt oddly calm. The candles flickered on the chipped counter, the radiator hissed like always, and the table was set neatly with my mismatched plates. Everything looked the same as the first time, because that was the point. Let them laugh. The silence that followed would be worth it. It didn't take long. Megan plopped onto the couch, glancing around with a smirk. "Déjà vu. Same shoebox. Same creaky floors," Jessica whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I think my first dorm was bigger than this." Laughter bubbled. Daniel shook his head, chuckling. "Sam, you're stubborn, I'll give you that." I smiled, pouring wine into their glasses. "Funny you should say that, Daniel. Stubbornness is how I got this place in the first place." They rolled their eyes, dismissing my words like always. Sarah sat quietly in the corner, sipping her drink, observing. She had slipped the folder onto the side table earlier, unnoticed. When Megan noticed her, she tilted her head. "So, the realtor. You really think of moving, Sam? Finally trading up?" I raised an eyebrow. "Maybe, or maybe I already did." Confusion flickered across their faces. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone casual. "Funny thing about this building, the landlord's not what you'd expect." Jessica laughed. "Oh, please. Some old guy cashing checks while you freeze in here?" Daniel smirked. "Yeah, Sam, you should introduce us. Maybe he'll give us a better deal." I smiled, holding their gaze. "Maybe you already know the landlord." The room went quiet, for a beat, then burst into laughter. "Yeah, right," Megan scoffed. "If you were the landlord, you wouldn't still be living in this dump." That was Sarah's cue. She set her glass down, her voice calm but firm. "Actually, Sam's not lying." The laughter faltered. She reached for the folder, sliding it across the table. "These are the property records. Samantha Lee is the owner of this building. Deed, mortgage records, tax filings, all in her name." The silence was thick. Jessica blinked. "Wait, what?" Daniel frowned, reaching for the folder. "This is some kind of joke." Sarah's eyes didn't waver. "No joke. She's your landlord. Every rent check in this building eventually ends up in her account." Their faces were priceless, confusion melting into disbelief, disbelief teetering on the edge of something else. Fear. Megan forced a laugh, waving her hand. "Come on, Sam. If you really owned this place, you wouldn't live here. You'd be upstairs in one of the bigger units." I met her eyes, steady. "Maybe. Or maybe I chose the smallest unit so I could pay down the mortgage faster." Because, unlike some people, I don't measure success by square footage. Her smirk faltered. For the first time, they didn't have a quick comeback. The folder lay open on the table, my name in bold letters. The evidence was right there, undeniable, but they weren't ready to admit defeat. Not yet. Daniel muttered, "So what? It's still just one building." Jessica added, "And it still looks cheap." They clung to the scraps of their mockery like lifelines, and I let them, because I knew the real blow was still coming. They thought the worst was over, that I had played my only card, but what they didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The Waisai. Next reveal would strip away their laughter completely. The folder lay open on the table, my name glowing on the deed like a silent thunderclap. But they still weren't ready to believe. Megan leaned back, crossing her arms. "Fine. You own this. Shoebox. Big deal," Jessica muttered. "Honestly, it just makes it sadder. You could live anywhere in the building, but you're still here." Daniel smirked. "Yeah, Sam. Owning one building doesn't make you successful." They wanted to cling to denial, to laugh their way out of the truth. But Sarah wasn't done. Sarah's voice cut through the tension, calm and deliberate. "You're misunderstanding. Samantha doesn't just own this apartment. She owns the entire building. Every floor. Every stairwell. Every unit." The words hit like a bomb. The room went still. "Wait," Jessica stammered, her wine glass trembling. "You mean—" Sarah nodded. "Yes. The rent from all 32 units? It goes to her. The repairs? The management? It's all under her name. Samantha Lee isn't just a tenant here. She's the landlord. This is her property." For a moment, all I heard was the hum of the radiator and the faint sounds of traffic outside. Megan's smirk dissolved, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. Jessica's jaw dropped, her face flushing red. And Daniel's expression twisted, somewhere between shock and resentment. "You?" he muttered. "You've been the landlord this whole time?" I met his eyes. "Yes. And while you laughed at me for living in a shoebox, you forgot something important. The shoebox belongs to me, and so does everyone else's." I could see it, the way their pride crumbled in front of each other. All those nights they mocked me, all the parties where I was the punchline, all the cruel jokes whispered behind my back, undone in seconds by a single truth. They weren't mocking a cheap tenant. They had been mocking their landlord. Megan forced a laugh, her voice shaky. "Well, good for you, Sam. That's impressive," Jessica chimed in weakly. "Yeah, totally. We were just kidding, you know." Daniel glared at me, bitterness dripping from his words. "You could have told us. Why keep it a secret?" I smiled calmly. "Because I didn't owe you an explanation. And honestly, watching your faces right now made every sacrifice worth it." Sarah closed the folder, her expression smug on my behalf. "I think we're done here." I stood, walking to the window, the city lights spilling into the room. My voice was steady, sharper than it had ever been. "You mocked me for living small. You laughed at my apartment, at my life. But the truth is, you were laughing inside a building I own. Every step you take, every wall you lean against, every floor under your feet, mine." Their silence was deafening. Jessica's face burned crimson. Megan stared at her glass, unable to meet my eyes. Daniel shoved his hands into his pockets, seething. For the first time, they weren't smirking. They weren't laughing. They were exposed. But as satisfying as it was, I knew this moment wasn't the end. Because humiliation doesn't fade quietly, and I could already see it. The resentment simmering in their eyes, ready to ignite the fallout. Though, night after Sarah dropped the truth like a hammer, my apartment was silent. No laughter, no smug comments, no eye-rolling jokes. Just silence, thick and heavy, like smoke after a fire. Megan was the first to break. She forced a smile, but her voice cracked. Well, Sam, that's good for you. We're proud of you. But pride doesn't come with clenched teeth. Jessica muttered something about just teasing before rushing out with her coat half buttoned. Her cheeks were red the whole time. Daniel lingered. His eyes burned holes into me, not with surprise anymore, but with resentment. You played us, he spat. You let us look stupid. I tilted my head, calm. No, Daniel. You did that all by yourself. He slammed the door on his way out. By Monday, the whispers started. Jessica didn't post about our shoebox dinners anymore. Megan sent me a half-hearted text. No hard feelings, right? Drink soon? I left it on read. Daniel stopped coming around completely. Mom called me, confused. Your brother says you've been keeping secrets. Is it true you own your building? Yes, Mom, I answered simply. I own it. There was a pause. Then softly, Samantha, I'm proud of you. For once, her words didn't sting. At work, colleagues who barely noticed me before suddenly wanted to know my story. A local community group even asked me to speak about affordable housing. The same people who once whispered cheap behind my back now whispered smart, resourceful, impressive. But the compliments didn't feel as sweet as I thought they would, because I realized the validation I craved had never been theirs to give. One evening, Daniel showed up outside the building. I found him pacing near the stoop, his face tight with anger. You could have helped me, he snapped. I've been struggling, and you had all this money, all this property. I cut him off. You mocked me every chance you got. You laughed when they tore me down. And now you want a handout? His jaw clenched. You'll regret this, Sam. I shook my head, voice calm. No. What I regret is expecting you to be proud of me. He stormed off, and for the first time, I didn't feel small in his shadow. That night, I sat by my window, the city lights glowing outside. For years, I thought revenge would feel like fireworks, loud, dazzling, final. But it didn't. It felt quieter. Like reclaiming pieces of myself I thought I'd lost. Their laughter no longer echoed in my ears. Instead, I heard my own voice, steady and clear. I built this. Me. And no one can take it away. Still, a question lingered. What now was exposing? Them enough? Or did I need to go further, cut them off completely, or maybe somehow forgive? I didn't know the answer yet. But I knew one thing. The next chapter of my life would be written by me, not by their cruel words. Because revenge had silenced their laughter, but empowerment. Empowerment was about to set me free, and I was ready to choose freedom. A week after the reveal, my building felt different. Not because the walls had changed or the radiator had stopped hissing, but because I had changed. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking inside it. I wasn't embarrassed by the chipped counters or the narrow hallways. This was my home, my building, my victory. I didn't invite them back. Not Megan, not Jessica, not even Daniel. Instead, I hosted dinner for the people who mattered. My tenants, my neighbors, the ones who had always seen me as more than a punchline. We crowded around my little table, laughter bouncing off the walls. Kids ran up and down the hallways, chasing each other while parents toasted to the community. And as I looked around, I realized this was the validation I'd been searching for all along. Not the fake smiles of friends who thrived on mockery, but a genuine connection with people who respected what I'd built. Megan sent another text. We should really catch up soon. Drinks? I deleted it without responding. Jessica tagged me in a post online calling me an inspiration. I didn't acknowledge it. And Daniel? He avoided me entirely, except for the occasional bitter voicemail about how I'd changed. Maybe I had. but change was survival. One evening, I stood on the roof looking out over the city. The skyline glittered, alive with possibility. I thought about every cruel laugh, every whispered insult, every moment I sat in silence as they tore me down. And I smiled. Because without their cruelty, maybe I wouldn't have found this fire maybe I wouldn't have built something so undeniable. Owning the building was never about money or bragging rights. It was about stability, about proving to myself that I could create the life I deserved, even when others said I wasn't enough. And now, their voices didn't matter, because my voice was louder, stronger, steady. So when I hear their laughter, in my memory I don't flinch anymore. I whisper back, "Laugh all you want." At the end of the day, you were laughing inside the walls I built. That's not humiliation. That's power. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Tell me, if people mocked your home or lifestyle, would you forgive them once you proved them wrong, or cut them out completely? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right.